Welcome to this lesson on the 5-to-1 ratio. Now we've all heard the idiom that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The idea that the loudest and arguably the most annoying problems get our attention first. This quote, however, has much more to do with ADHD than one might initially think. The first application of this quote to ADHD has to do with the history of the ADHD diagnosis itself. That is, for a long time, ADHD was believed to be, by and large, a disorder affecting boys. There were relatively few cases of girls with ADHD, and those tended to be associated with quote-unquote tomboy type presentations. However, as our understanding of ADHD has evolved and we gained a better appreciation of the various subtypes of ADHD, we now know that there is an entire subgroup of children with ADHD who present as primarily inattentive. These children are not hyperactive or impulsive. As such, they rarely signal red flags because their inattentive behaviors are not disruptive to others and rarely cause a disruption in class. As such, since girls are more likely to represent as inattentive, they were primarily neglected from any form of treatment or identification because they were not disruptive, i.e. a squeaky wheel, and therefore were not getting the grease or receiving any type of treatment. The second application for this idiom to ADHD, and the one more relevant to this course, is the method in which parents respond to their children. When I meet parents of children with ADHD, they are often at their wits' end. They are constantly on guard to identify, redirect, and correct their children's behavior. As a result, these parents admit that they are constantly reprimanding their children's bad behavior. In fact, many parents sadly report that they feel as though they rarely, if ever, say a good word to their ADHD child. Being positive with and about your children is vital to healthy parenting. While redirection and consequences are sometimes useful, it is critical that children also know when they are doing well, including children with ADHD. Parents are quick to tell their children what they are doing wrong. Given this tendency, it is understandable that children assume that most of what they do is wrong. Moreover, rarely hearing that they made a good decision leaves them uncertain as to what they are doing when they're doing something right. In fact, many children are left assuming that they made a good decision simply because no one told them that they did something wrong. This makes it very difficult for children to know how and when to behave in particular ways because they cannot predict appropriate behavior. They cannot predict when it is that they're doing something that's appropriate. In this lesson, we're going to focus on what we call the 5-to-1 ratio. That is, we encourage parents to make 5 positive statements for each negative comment. As you can imagine, this is a task that many parents find very challenging, especially parents of children with ADHD. Many parents become blinded by their child's misbehavior and fail to see that the child is actually gaining skills and learning from the parent's instruction. These parents seem to be magnetically attracted to the negative behaviors, recognizing only the negative actions of their child. The goal of this strategy is to force you to see something else, something that really is already there. The idea behind the 5-to-1 ratio has roots in 2 important concepts. First, as parents attempt to reach an appropriate proportion of positive to negative comments, they quickly find that there are many more positive behaviors than they originally perceived. In fact, many parents eventually struggle because they begin to see too many positive behaviors. I know, sounds like a myth, but it really is true. As parents reach this point, they find that they are having many more positive interactions with their child. No longer stuck on the child's negative behaviors, they find that the majority of their conversations and general comments are positive in nature. This, of course, improves the overall interactions between the parent and the child and helps the child see that his parent notices him for more than being bad. The second concept is the tendency for parents to begin turning negative behaviors and negative interactions into positive ones. Many parents are currently in a position where they are focused on identifying only inappropriate behavior. Their primary goal is to identify his rule breaking and to punish the child for breaking those rules as quickly as possible, hoping that he'll never do it again. But utilizing the 5-to-1 ratio concept helps parents to look beyond the problems and to recognize the positives that their children possess. It is not always easy. In fact, it is not always possible. But with practice and perseverance, you and your child will learn that positive interactions are much more productive than negative ones. Sadly, I recall a number of patients with whom I have worked and attempted to use this strategy. After reviewing the process with the mother, she left the office stating that she was not confident that it would be effective. When they returned the next week, they admit that it was a total failure. Mothers will return to the office and say, "He kept making bad choices and I could not find enough positives to keep up." She was frustrated and convinced that this strategy was ineffective, at least for her and her child. Now, there are a few problems with this. The first was that in this example, the mother continued to be of the opinion that her child was making bad choices, suggesting that he was engaging in willful disobedience. Now, as we've discussed in previous lessons, rarely is it the case that the child would intentionally do something that he knows will result in some form of restriction or punishment. As such, it is highly unlikely that the child was intentionally making bad decisions. Nonetheless, as long as the mother maintained that perspective of his behavior, her frustration with his actions would continue to be very high because she saw it as intentional. After all, whether true or not, if you believe that someone is doing something to intentionally defy you, you are going to be upset by it. Therefore, you are more likely to be punitive and irritable with that person. When that person is your child, it certainly does not pose well for you and your child's relationship. The second problem, as you can imagine, is the fact that the mother reported that she could not find enough positives to account for all the negatives. I asked her for an example of her child's misbehavior from the past week so that we could walk through the process. Interestingly, she offered an example that occurred that morning before the session with my office. She noted that one of the rules in her home is that her 6-year-old son is not allowed to bring an open cup of drink into the TV room, which is carpeted. She noted that this has been a rule for the past 2 years, ever since they moved into that home. She reported that it never fails. She has to get onto him several times a week because he continues to bring his drink into that room. Of course, that morning, he took the open cup into the TV room, and while watching TV, spilled his cup of tea on the carpet. The mother said that she was in her bedroom getting dressed when he came in and told her about the quote-unquote accident. As a result of the rule breaking, the mother reprimanded him and took away his TV privileges for the rest of the day. As the mother told the story, you could see her frustration growing. She was upset about the incident and she could hardly stand it. She then said, "So what do I do about that? There is nothing good for me to say to him because we had to leave right away for me to get him to school on time." I felt that this was a great example to use, as it is obviously a source of frustration. It was a recent event, and it is something that, according to the mother, occurs regularly. So to help her identify some positives, I called upon some of the previous information she had given me about her son in earlier sessions. Now, I began by encouraging the mother. I told her that I know it can be very difficult, especially when you're in the heat of the moment, and when we step back for a second, things become a little bit more evident, and certainly from the perspective of sitting in my office where we're not in the living room looking at the wet spot on the floor, it is a little bit easier to think about things. But nonetheless, here we go. So certainly the negative is that the child brought the drink into the living room, and what mother would predict would happen, the drink spilled on the carpet. But let's see if we can find some positives. The first positive was what the child was doing or perhaps not doing. You see, in previous sessions, the mother had repeatedly complained that she was unable to get ready in the morning because she had to constantly entertain her son. He had to be in the same room as her and was constantly seeking her attention. Today, however, he was watching TV, allowing her to get ready uninterrupted. That was a huge deal in their home. She should have told him, "Hey, man, I really appreciate you watching TV while I'm getting ready. Great job with that." That could have been positive number one. The second positive was somewhat related to the first. That is, the child was already prepared for school. Again, in previous sessions, the mother reported that she would often have to stay on him all morning long for there to be any hope for them to be ready for school in time. Today, he was ready early. In fact, as we were talking about it, she looked to the side and said, well, actually, he even dressed himself today. Again, a huge deal for this kid. The mother should have told him, by the way, buddy, great job getting dressed today. That was great. I know you need me to help you a lot of time, but you did it yourself. Great work. That could have been positive number 2. Next, I asked the mother what she saw when she entered the TV room. She said, in a very irritated way, "He used my good dish towel to soak up the tea. Now I have to wash it again." As you can imagine, my response would have been quite different. Again, in past sessions, she would tell me that he would try to cover up his mistakes and messes. In the past, he has spilled a drink and put a floor pillow over the spill spot, hiding it for her just to find later. While he did not make the best choice, would it not be appropriate to tell him that you appreciate him attempting to clean up the mess, as opposed to putting the floor pillow or blanket over the spill again, making the mess even worse? That could have been positive number 3. In much the same vein, the 4th and 5th positives come from what he did after the spill. I recall asking the mother where her son put the now empty cup. She looked surprised at that seemingly unimportant question. She said, well, it was in the sink. I then reminded her of how hard she has been working with him to get him to put his dishes in the sink when he was done. She told stories in previous sessions about how she would find empty or half-full cups all over the house, where he would just leave them when he was finished with them. Putting the cup in the sink is certainly deserving of positive number 4. The 5th and final positive needed for this example is arguably the most important. That is, he made a mistake, attempted to correct it, and then went and told his mom about it. Now, of course, he made a mistake in taking the cup in the TV, and of course, as his mother predicted, he spilled the cup. But to try to correct his error, and then, even though he thought he did a pretty good job cleaning it up, went to tell his mother about it, that's fantastic and should be praised. The mother should say, I know you made a mistake, and we need to make sure we remember not to have open cups in the TV room again, but thank you for coming to tell me about it. That was great. Now, let's go clean the mess up, grab the paper towels. Sometimes we get so hung up on the negatives that we fail to see all of the positives that surround the event. Now, in our example, certainly some of those positives could feel contrived, could feel like we're stretching. But the point is, in this example, there were a lot of positive things that happened. And imagine, if the child had not spilled the drink, the mom probably would have praised him for putting the cup in the sink. If something else had happened, some random accident had happened, and he went in and told mom about it, she probably would have praised him for letting her know about something that happened. And more importantly, had he not spilled the drink, she probably would have praised him for getting himself ready and allowing her to get ready in the morning. So when we take the negative out of the equation and we just look at the positives, praising him for that good work feels a little bit more natural. But when we view it through the lens of the negative or inappropriate behavior, then is when we seem to feel as though the praise is contrived. My argument, or my advice for you, is to not think about it that way. We need to look at the positives that our kids present. We need to praise them for it. We need to give them the encouragement to continue to do what it is we want them to do. Now, the underlying goal of the 5-to-1 ratio rule is to stop focusing so much on the negative behaviors that our children with ADHD will invariably demonstrate, and instead put effort into seeing the positives that tend to be overlooked and marginalized. Our children really are wonderful, even the most frustrating ones. So look for those positives and let your kid know that you're proud of him. Let him know when he is finally, quote unquote, finally making the decision that you want him to make, or doing the thing that you keep wanting him, or asking him, or begging him, or threatening him to do. Praise him for that. Tell him good job. Many times kids with ADHD simply don't hear those words enough. Okay, give this strategy a try. write to us in the discussion or comment section and let us know how it's working for you. If you're having any difficulty or you're searching for some of those positives, write to us and hopefully we or other parents will be able to write back to you and give you some strategies. Again, we're in this together, so let's communicate and stay in touch. All right, so we'll see you at the next lesson.